For some, the holiday visit with one's family is a source of warmth and comfort after a hectic year. But for many others, such a period of supposed R&R can be dreaded. Is this warranted? Psychology and pop culture has a history of blaming the family on poor mental health, but how fair is this really? Here's an interesting story. In the 1960s, George Brown, a British sociologist, was observing the clinical outcomes of patients with schizophrenia who were returning from treatment. He noticed that the patients who went to live in lodgings, care facilities that did not involve their families, had pretty positive outcomes in terms of well-being and treatment. But what about the patients returning to their partners and parents? Brown found that, surprisingly, these individuals would often experience a severe relapse of symptoms. How could the comfort of home bring about worse outcomes? He hypothesized that there is a possibility that family relationships could be a factor in schizophrenia relapse. Over time, Brown, working in collaboration with Michael Rutter, tried to figure out how to measure the range of feelings and emotions to be found in ordinary families. Here, Brown wasn't necessarily looking at abusive households or families that were obviously dysfunctional or neglectful. Rather, Brown was searching for more subtle mechanisms that could explain the differences he saw in patients. As Brown set about in interviewing the many families that were involved in the study, he found one key observation. The family environments that were associated with relapse and schizophrenia were often characterized by three key traits: criticism, hostility, and emotional over-involvement directed towards the patient. It was with this key finding where George Brown developed the construct of expressed emotion. What is expressed emotion exactly? Assessed through a short interview process, psychologists observe how the patient's family members refer to the patient. Criticism refers to the critical remarks and disapproval of their behavior. This can include complaining about them, always sleeping, or never tidying up. Another aspect of EE includes hostility, which can be captured in more generalized negative summaries of the patient, such as calling them annoying, lazy, or simply rejecting them as a true member of the family, such as making them a scapegoat. Finally, emotional over-involvement, or EOI, involves statements that remove any agency in the patient and sometimes infantilizes them. Family members might finish the sentences of the patient, speak on their behalf, or simply say things like, "I can't leave them alone because I worry about them constantly." Later, researchers wondered whether this sort of adversarial relationship was simply a reaction to difficult individuals with psychopathology. Could having a child that is impulsive and rebellious simply evoke these hostile and critical responses? However, after interviewing and assessing the history of patients in high EE environments, these authors concluded EE does not appear to be a simple reaction to specific characteristics of patients. In other words, high EE is not simply a response to the severity of the patient's illness, rather it is more often than not a form of communication and relation that frustrates, infantilizes, and rejects the individual regardless of their own faculties. Sadly, research has demonstrated that the influence of EE isn't restricted to those suffering from schizophrenia. Further studies have found high associations between EE and relapse across various other psychopathologies, such as anxiety, bipolar, depression, eating disorders, substance use and addiction, as well as PTSD. To make matters worse, parents with mental illnesses of their own tend to be more likely to express high EE, suggesting that there is a transgenerational transmission of mental illness. Parental EE status seems to be relatively stable over time, creating a challenge for vulnerable, genetically predisposed children, and it therefore has the potential to promote a self-perpetuating cycle of children's problem behavior and high EE within a family. Of course, this isn't the only theory that proposes an association between family environments and mental illness. Marshall Linehan, the creator of dialectical behavioral therapy and leading researcher in the study of borderline personality disorder, or BPD, proposed a theory that similarly links parental style to the development of mental health issues. Namely, Linehan argues that BPD is caused by an interaction of a certain genetic disposition and an invalidating home environment. Linehan characterizes this invalidation as being comprised primarily of three factors: an intolerance towards the expression of personal experiences, the discouraging of emotional expression, and the inability to trust one's own feelings. As a result, those growing up in an invalidating environment are taught that their feelings do not matter and are not given the coping mechanisms that are needed in order to regulate their emotions properly. Of course, one does not need to struggle with BPD or schizophrenia to resonate with those isolating feelings of invalidation and hostility that such family environments can create. There's no license or crash course in raising a family, and most of us have been raised imperfectly by human beings dealing with their own struggles and childhood deficits. But the question here is, more broadly, what are we to do? There are a few options, thankfully. Firstly, family-based interventions have been proven to work. This includes workshops with the families in terms of learning new ways to communicate and empathize with the patient. This might involve teaching parents to recognize how their own responses to certain behaviors could actually reinforce said behaviors. Conflict resolution for the client in the form of methods such as motivational interviewing and nonviolent communication can also be effective tools for those with uncooperative relatives. Of course, this is all easier said than done. It takes a village to help those who are hurting, and this is why I'm particularly interested in Trieste, an Italian city that has community mental health centers open 24/7, supported housing facilities, and helps those suffering with finding employment and resolving interpersonal conflicts. Perhaps, hopefully with enough policy change, we can one day see the Trieste model applied more broadly and finally recognize that mental health must be treated at all levels of the individual, including the family. This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Are you curious about the world around you? Research shows that nurturing your curiosity not only drives lifelong learning, but is also essential for living the good life. So are you ready to ignite your curiosity and broaden your horizons? With Brilliant, you can transform your wonder into knowledge through interactive lessons that make complex concepts accessible and exciting. What I love about Brilliant is its hands-on approach, which emphasizes the fundamentals of STEM, science and math, building your foundational skills and ensuring you don't miss any important concepts. Brilliant not only builds problem-solving skills, but also enhances critical thinking abilities, making you a more adept learner. Courses like mathematical reasoning, scientific thinking, and introduction to probability all offer fascinating insights that you can apply in real life, from analyzing data trends to assessing risks in everyday decisions. With Brilliant, you can develop real knowledge in just minutes a day. By actively engaging your brain in critical thinking exercises, you achieve lifelong retention of information. The daily challenges make learning not just rewarding, but also addictive. Enrich your curiosity and your life with everything Brilliant has to offer for free for 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/Sisyphus55 or clicking the link in the description. Plus, you'll receive 20% off an annual premium subscription.